So good morning, Westside. Pull my script out here. So I'm not wearing my social justice cap today. I'm just taking off my cap and being a regular human being. And I'll start with another moment in UU history, June 17th, 2018. I got a phone call from a BFF and fellow UU, Diane Jones. She asked, "Hey, are you at church yet?" I answered, "Yes, I am at church. I'm at church in Jackson, Mississippi." More on that later, but that is a date in my UU history. This past April, the National Memorial for Peace and Justice opened in Montgomery, Alabama. As soon as I knew about this, I wanted to make a trip happen. The Legacy Museum and Lynching Memorial are the work of the Equal Justice Initiative, founded by public interest attorney and author of Just Mercy, Bryan Stevenson. I heard Mr. Stevenson speak at last year's WARE lecture at the UUA General Assembly. One of his challenges to us was to get proximate to the issues and to the people who are the recipients of injustice. Now, my trip to Montgomery did not include a plan for getting proximate, other than experiencing the museum and memorial. But in Montgomery, I did indeed get proximate. Not in the way envisioned by Bryan Stevenson, but in a way that truly deepened my humanity. However, before I got to Jackson, and before I got to Montgomery, I made a stop in Vicksburg, Mississippi. Friends had recommended a place to eat lunch, which I did, then decided to check out the Lower Mississippi Museum, just down the street. Vicksburg is right across the Mississippi River from Louisiana. And James, if you'll pull up the river slide. I said hello to the museum docent, not taking up her offer to introduce me to the museum. But as I walked past her, I thought, I bet she knows why part of the river here is called the Yazoo River. I had noticed this as I was driving to the restaurant, and I was confused when I saw a Yazoo River sign, knowing I had just crossed the Mississippi River from Louisiana. I was driving parallel and just yards away from that mighty river. I turned and walked back to the docent, who I guess was probably in her 80s. I asked her about the sign I had seen. Her eyes lit up. She pulled out a map and began to explain to me just why it was so. Without going into her whole story, which started with the Civil War, although it was very interesting, the Mississippi River had changed course in 1876, leaving Vicksburg without a riverfront. The Army Corps of Engineers came in 1902 and diverted the nearby Yazoo River into the old riverbed. So yeah, I was driving by the Yazoo River in Vicksburg, though I'd crossed the Mississippi River just 3 miles back. She ended her explanation with, "No one ever asked me about that." Do people tend to politely greet her, then walk on, partly due to her age? Had I been guilty of age implicit bias? I'm not sure, but I was glad of the interaction with her. Experiencing her genuine delight gave me delight too. So back to my moment in UU history, I had learned on my Saturday arrival in Jackson that there was a UU church nearby, near my Airbnb. I decided I would attend adult forum on Sunday morning, take a short hike on the Natchez Trace, and then head to Montgomery. I asked my host about it. I felt pretty comfortable asking her. The no solicitation sign on her door said, "No sales solicitations, no religious solicitations, Scouts welcome." She told me that yes, the UU church was right up the main street near her house. Turns out she had visited a UU church some when she lived in Kentucky. During this conversation, she said, "If you notice the pink building you may have passed on your way here, it is the only abortion clinic in Alabama. I'm a financial donor to it." In my head, I'm like, wow, I'm in the Deep South. I'm at my first ever Airbnb, and it's hosted by an atheist, feminist, progressive. By the way, guess what book was on her guest room nightstand? Novel, Jackson, Mississippi. Any takers? The Help. Okay, back to church in Jackson, where for sure I was guilty of implicit bias. The group of about 12 asked where I was from, and not surprisingly, the border insanity came up, which led to the drug war insanity, which led to marijuana, cannabis, and the legalization of it. Now, this is where my implicit bias made its ugly appearance. A man of about 40 was there and wanted to know the latest in Texas. He walked with a cane because he had multiple sclerosis. He was interested in it for himself, but also for his patients at a nursing home. Here's how biased I was. I was thinking, wait, you're giving patients medicine? A lady sitting nearby must have read my mind. She said, he's a doctor. Well, that sounds ugly even to me this morning, that I didn't even consider that he might be a doctor. My heart muscle needs a workout. I wonder if by recognizing my own biases, I can be less judgmental in acknowledging others' biases. At the same time, I and others need to recognize these biases and then overcome them. James, if you'll pull up the next slide. Oh, it's there. My heart muscle did get a workout at the Peace and Justice Legacy Museum and Lynching Memorial in Montgomery. As you can imagine, there were heart-wrenching moments all through that exhibit. The museum is on the site of a former slave warehouse and near an auction block where tens of thousands of enslaved people were trafficked. The Lynching Memorial, which you see on the slide, is a profoundly haunting sculpture of hundreds of hanging steel monuments naming counties in the South where more than 4,000 documented racial terror lynchings took place between 1877 and 1950. The names of the victims are engraved on these hanging monuments. I did have an inspiring moment in the museum, though it took place in a serious context. I overheard two young black boys reading an exhibit that talked about how people of color are incarcerated at a disproportionate rate to white people. One of the boys was reading the poster and was trying to pronounce disproportionately. I heard him say, "I don't know what that word is." Then he continued on. I walked up and pointed to the word and pronounced it, then asked if they knew what it meant. They shook their heads no. So I gave them an example to define it. I said, it means if you have 100 white men and 100 black men, and they have committed the same crime, it is more likely that more of the black men will go to prison than the white men. For example, 75 black men to 50 white men for the same crime. One of them immediately and vehemently said, "That's not fair." And he added, "And they stay in prison longer for the same crimes." I said, "You are exactly right, and I am glad I'm here, and I am glad you're here." What hope this brief connection gave me. These young people are getting an accurate education, they're interested, and they're already informed at such a young age. The encounters I've spoken of so far are not really uncommon. Most of us have them as we move through life. Maybe some of them inspire us to do better. It's the encounter, again near my Airbnb, but now in Alabama, where the getting proximate happened. Can you bring up the photo of the lion? Thank you, James. So this Airbnb was a refurbished Victorian house with a downstairs beer garden, though it was now closed after serving Sunday brunch. The host invited me to join him and friends for a beer after I got settled. And those of you who know me well can easily guess what my answer was to that offer. I told him I would love to try an Alabama brew if he had that, and he did. When I came downstairs to join the small group, I was treated to one, which I ended up not getting to finish, because what followed in the next 2 hours was the catalyst for today's reflection. We'd been sitting there introducing ourselves. My host and another guy there both had Texas connections. The host's daughter attends University of North Texas, and his friend's grandfather owns some of the land that became Lake Louisville. Very soon, another of the host's friends walked in and said he wanted to show him something on his car. So the two of them walked out. A few minutes later, they walked back in. What had actually happened was this friend had noticed a young lady lying on the sidewalk in the hot afternoon sun, about 20 yards up the street. I offered to go with them to check on her, suggesting that she might be alarmed if she woke up to see a couple of men hovering. We filled a glass with water and went to her. She was very asleep, maybe passed out, dead to the world. I was pretty sure she was homeless too. I first tried nudging her and saying hello a few times. Hello? Hello? I then put water on my hand and glided it on her neck. No response. I tried her cheek, her forehead. Still no response. I stood up and we talked about what to do. More than anything, I did not want her to get arrested, and I wanted her to be safe. This was a moment to gauge each other's biases about this young woman and her circumstances. I felt relieved that we were all on the same page. No one wanted her to get arrested. Police can be wonderful helpers, but there are some police officers, just like people who aren't police, who tend to judge homeless people as criminals. As we discussed options, another friend joined us. Since we were having no luck rousing her, she wondered if we should call for paramedics. I said calling them would probably automatically bring the police. My Airbnb host decided to call a friend he knew that worked for the city. Maybe she could get a paramedic involved without including the police. That was the plan. No such luck, though. Who should arrive shortly thereafter? Not only an ambulance, but also a police car, and before it was all over, a fire truck and another police car. A total of 8 taxpayer-paid personnel and their equipment. At the same time that the paramedics and first police officers arrived, the young lady had finally started waking up. And what does she first notice as she wakes up surrounded by way too many people? The police. She immediately started crying. I bent down to her, trying to calm her, offering her water. She was in good shape physically. We told the police we would see after her. And though one police officer talked about it, he did not arrest her. I walked with her to the house, holding her hand, and she became quite lively in her conversation about being homeless and how she had just had a short fight with her boyfriend. She said, "It was my fault. I started shoving him. He walked away. We parted on purpose so no one would get violent." I told her that sounded like a good plan. As we arrived at the house, I don't know what sparked her crying again, but as she cried, she said, "Please don't make me go home. Please don't make me go back to Florida. I can't go back there." I just held her and said, "You don't have to go back. No one is going to make you go back. We don't want you to get arrested. You can hang out here a bit." There was pizza, and when she found out there was Coca-Cola, she was in heaven. She was a vibrant, very young woman of 20 who had, at least for this time in her life, chosen to be homeless. She had already accumulated thousands of dollars in student debt on a nursing track, had a very large family in Florida, and was feeling that her near future was going to be spent taking care of those siblings and paying off her debt. She loved her mom and was grateful that her mom had seen to getting her an IUD, but she couldn't go back to what had been both poverty and abuse. This chosen life of poverty and possible danger was something she felt she had control over. This was a transformative moment for me. This was Heart of Democracy Parker Palmer's advice of no fixing, no saving, no setting one straight, and living color. I knew that I shouldn't try to fix her worldview. It was much more important to just be there with her. This is her Facebook cover photo. A lion, a dandelion tail, and he's got some dandelion on his nose. To me, it embodies this young lady's personality and reflects her sense of joy. She was 5 months into homelessness that hot June evening. My wish is that she keeps this sense of herself and who she is in her core. It may be the saving grace for her. I believe that positive encounters and connections with those beyond, or those who are beyond our friends and family, especially with those whose lives are utterly alien to us, as Parker Palmer wrote, matter. Connections beyond our tribes may even be the hope for humanity.